Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Everything Frog Girl Fridays. I'm your host, Danielle Spinelli. I have Keith Lewis on with us. Yay! So excited he's on here with CargoNet. No idea how much I respect this guy. He is it just knows his stuff, right? Like he's been doing it for so long. Boots on the ground, like the guy that makes recoveries and seen all the things and helps education wise. And just big, almost like hero status in the cargo theft world. So super honored that he agreed to come on the podcast and share all his knowledge. It's kind of like a pulse check on what's going on. What are a little bit of new trends? Obviously, we don't want to give the bad guys all the information, but just to kind of keep you guys up to date on what's happening and also focusing mainly on if something does happen, what do you do? What are some best practices to put in place prior to hopefully nothing will ever happen, but having those little mock fake setups type thing where like hey, we're pretending that this load was stolen. How would we operate? What are some steps that we would take? Having that as a routine process, especially with freight slow, it's a great time to kind of put in that education and training. So let's go ahead and jump in it. All right, here we go. Thanks for joining me, Keith. I've been wanting you on here forever, I feel like. So I'm happy you're on here with me, fellow Georgian.
Well, I wanted to be on here forever.
I go good. I love it. And talking all things cargo theft. And, today I kind of wanted you to come on and let's do like a pulse check on 2026 and what we're thinking for this year and like what's happened kind of last year. How can people stay, protected and stuff like that. Stuff we talk about all the time, but just to kind of get it on the podcast as well.
Sure.
If you don't mind just doing like a real quick intro on yourself and then we can kind of get rocking and rolling.
Sure. Keith Lewis, Vice President of Operations at Verisk CargoNet, 20 years in supply chain. Then I went into law enforcement, worked as a task force agent for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, worked the last 12 years of my law enforcement career. I worked nothing but supply chain theft and fraud. Any type of crime against the supply chain, brokers, carriers, shippers, freight forwarders, drivers, and the like, I worked. And retired, and I've been with Verisk CargoNet for about 15 years, a little over 15 years.
Sure, that was like the perfect transition from GBI to CargoNet.
Yes,
I'm sure now if you were on the road, it would be quite a different world from back whenever you were being a GBI agent.
Well, I'm still on the road as I serve as a reserve deputy sheriff in Arizona and also a part-time police officer here in Georgia. So I still have my finger on the pulse.
Do all the things. I love it. So since you're there on the pulse, you see everything. What are some things, I guess, that you saw last year that were different and new? I know I talk a lot about like cluster theft and rail theft and kind of all those things. A lot of those things are still the same, but kind of things have been different and ramping up. What have you been seeing?
Well, the cluster theft or leakage, whatever nomenclature you want to use, or the bill of lading fraud, it's another diversion tactic, and we haven't seen a lot of that in the last couple of months.
Okay.
We've seen more straight up fraud, and we're starting to see a lot more of credit card, stolen credit, stolen PO, stolen shipper, where someone's posing as the shipper or the manufacturer, and they hire an unsuspecting carrier to go pick up their load at the shipper thinking they're hauling it to the consignee, or they've stolen a credit card number and they're using that to pay the freight or buy the material. So the tentacles keep getting longer, broader, more integrated into all the different ways of the enterprise of doing business in our global supply chain. And we're still seeing the global threat that we saw for the last couple of years. It's not gone away. Our numbers, we brought in we're close to 3,600 thefts. As of now, we're still getting thefts in from last year. When we do finally close out the books, we'll probably see somewhere in the like of 3,850 thefts for the year, which will be equal to last year. So it's static. It's not growing. The fraud percentage is increasing, but what's somewhat as interesting is some of the commodities are changing as consumer buying changes over the years. What the bad guys are very good at is return on investment. They know what to steal and they know what the consumer will buy immediately.
Well, I think too, like electronics were a big thing for a long time. And then now that they have to connect to the internet and they're able to kind of shut things down too. I think that's been making a difference. I know whenever we were at your guys' summit there in California, I think it was Microsoft was talking about like on the or the not PS4s, Xboxes, how they're able to even shut down the Xbox whenever they see it's stolen or go investigate where did you buy this and things like that too.
Yeah, you would hope that that happens. However, they only I can't speak for Microsoft, but companies only have so
Mhm.
many resources to go out and find these things, so they're not going overseas, or maybe they are. I don't know. It's it continues to move at the speed of light. The one of the big problems we have now is we're conducting my team. We're conducting probably a half a dozen search warrants a week
Oh wow.
with Western United States, South Florida, and the Eastern Coast. So we're getting those phone calls late at night, and we're trying to track down victims at night to, hey, we've got your stuff, or is this your stolen product? And it's a challenge for my team and for law enforcement.
Are you seeing that just at major warehousing or mainly like cross docking facilities, or where are you guys mainly finding this stolen freight?
You name it, people's
Okay.
houses, office buildings. A search warrant is conducted in a building in a second floor in an office complex, and it's jammed full of stolen goods. I've done search warrants at people's houses and found things in the basement and upstairs, and their garage looked like, when I go out and search the garage, they had the kind of the podium, the pedestal there with the clipboard, and waiting for the UPS driver or the courier to show up to pick up these goods that they're shipping right out of their house to the consumer because they're selling them online. So there's no standard, and the cross dock term is overused. It's
Okay.
or warehouse is overused. I guess you could just call it any freestanding building with an open door is where they're cross docking and moving these goods. Trailer to trailer is a big thing.
Hmm.
Backs up his trailer to another driver's trailer. They unload the product, put it on another trailer. I've seen them use cases that I've worked personally where they use a flatbed trailer as their cross dock, their loading platform, and they've got an electric pallet jack, and they back up a trailer to a flatbed, another flatbed, and they're using the flatbed kind of in a triangular type of scenario to offload goods from one trailer and put them on another. So they're very creative. There's no
Yeah.
shortage of ingenuity with the bad guys.
Well, it's funny because a lot of times the drivers or the first driver, anyways, is usually innocent on it and doesn't know that this is happening, and they're getting rerouted in a blind shipment. Is that mainly what you're seeing too? Whenever it's like the initial drivers, or is it kind of full steam ahead? What's the biggest trend? I guess.
Well, I look at things from a different point of view, where you could say the driver wasn't involved. However, the law enforcement term we use is knew or should have known.
Hmm.
Too good to be true. The old thing, if something's too good to be true, it's probably not. So if they're going to hire you and you're using the term blind shipment, which is the appropriate term, and they're going to tell the driver it's a blind shipment, and instead of going from, say, Ontario to New York, it's going to go from Ontario, California to Fontana, California, but we're still going to pay you the same thing. We're still going to give
Right.
you $4,000 to go from A to B. And the driver's, well, I'm just an innocent victim here, but they paid me the same thing. I mean, there comes a
Come
point in
on.
time where you have to start saying, well, you're not complicit, you're not involved, but you're somewhat negligent with your judgment.
Almost like guilty by association, I guess, is kind of how you could pin them.
I wouldn't go that far to say guilty, I'd
Okay.
say negligent.
Okay.
Coming from the legal nomenclature, I'd say negligent would be a better way to put it, but they knew. They knew something was up.
Yeah, most of the time, because I know I've had drivers send me videos where well, like you're talking about trailer to trailer, where they're backing up to a U-Haul and they're like filming, like, I don't feel comfortable about this. It's like, call somebody or do something. Or, I mean, I'm sure they kind of feel like their life's in danger too, but immediately after they're, hey, this just happened to me and this is where it was at and things like that. But a lot of times they don't. And it goes way down the line before that gets like pulled up. So,
Well, they're stuck going with the flow. I don't know if they think their lives are in danger, but they're kind of stuck. They're stuck in a bad situation. I do feel bad for them because they realize something's wrong. They make an outcry to either you or us, and there's really in very few cases there's an immediate response. We've had a couple
yeah.
of them in Arizona with stolen copper, where we got those phone calls on Saturday, and I worked with Bill Johnson with Travelers on one, and he and I worked together. It was over a weekend where we actually tracked down the shipper while the freight was still being unloaded, and they said, yeah, that's not what's supposed to happen. So a lot of times it's the timing, right? The driver does that outcry, and the cavalry's not quick to respond, and the load, by the time everybody puts the pieces back together, the load's long gone.
Yeah, and it was interesting even at your guys' summit there. That's kind of a big piece, right? Like the finger pointing usually happens first, and that causes more of a delay. Or you don't have an after hours contact information, and so that causes more of a delay. What are some big steps that you Mainly my listeners are mainly brokers. So for brokers who are dealing with shippers and kind of needing to have all the pieces, what would you, if it does happen where there's a cargo theft, what are kind of like some first steps that you recommend for them to take place, and also some pre steps like prior to having a load picked up, you should be having this information.
I don't know how much time you have, but I have a whole I have a whole library of things to do. But
Yeah.
pre-theft, you need to have a plan in place. You sit around the table and do mock exercises. We do them all the time with our customers where they'll call us, and I know it's a mock theft. I know it's not a real theft, but I don't tell my team. And we go into action. What are the steps we're going to take? We're going to contact law enforcement. We're going to contact CargoNet. Or if we have a GPS on the trailer, we're going to activate the GPS or look at the macro point. We're going to do all these type of things on the front end, get the alerts out. That first, the TV show, the first 48 hours, I say it's the first 48 minutes because the trailer's on wheels. So
Yeah.
it can be, you're changing jurisdictions, you're changing states, and different states have different ways they do things in regard to these things. But getting that police report filed as quick as possible is key because your load could be stolen and law enforcement may be hesitant to stop it without a police report made because it comes into that whole Fourth and Fifth Amendment issue of search and seizure without probable cause to make that stop. So you don't want to lose it's the fruits of the poisonous tree. You don't want to lose all your evidence on a bad stop. So,
Yeah.
and then post theft, you need to have a plan in place for post theft. It's critical that somebody's got to have, whether it's us, you, somebody has to have after hours contact information or someone that's responsible. Who is responsible for this? And so many times we see, yeah, okay, well, just call me and we'll look that up for you. We'll let you know. And law enforcement may be on a search warrant or they may have a truck stopped on the side of the road. And that truck and that search warrant's not going to be going on the next day. So
Right.
somebody's got to take responsibility immediately and say, I got this, and take ownership of it and turn that car around and go back to work, get on the computer at home and work with law enforcement. I'm speaking from experience of what we deal with on a daily basis to confirm that product is stolen, because if we can't confirm it's stolen, it's a law enforcement term. We have to let it walk. We have to leave it with the bad guy. And obviously it's not going to be around tomorrow and we can't go back. So you need to have a, kind of that proactive and reactive situation, roundtable, tabletop exercises, mock scenarios, and networking with law enforcement. You need to have that local law enforcement contact where your facility is, where your headquarters are, because you never know when you need somebody to call that friend, that call a friend
Yeah.
card and say, help, I need you to call this other agency and let them know that we're a victim here.
Yeah, good point. As that was gonna be my next thing is I actually just dealt with a customer the other day where they had a load stolen and could not get a police report entered. They're like, you have to fly out here and make the report. And so I put them in touch with the CHP guys. They helped them get that done. But it is frustrating for people when they don't know how to make a report. And I know one thing that I learned at your guys' summit too was whenever you are making a report, to not do the terms of like, kind of do like the logistics terms, make it more plain, simple English, like police terms, I guess, more like, and then also making sure that you're not like, well, I think it's stolen. Like, no, you need to say this is stolen. What are some other tips that you
Exactly.
have? Yeah.
Yeah, there's the three things. It's what I think, what I know, and what I can prove. And that's what I always
Yeah.
tell people. But you're 100% correct with when you're talking to the police, you're going to get one bite at the apple. Make it a good one. Before you
Yeah.
make that call, think about what you're going to say. There's plenty of search engines out there that you can use to help you. How do I talk to law enforcement in law enforcement terms? And talk in terms, if you're going to call California, I think I did this. I know I did it on my last educational webinar where I had law enforcement officers on there explaining the code sections and going through how to make a police report in the state of California. So we're doing more of that. We're getting ready to do one for the Eastern United States on how to make a police report along the Eastern Seaboard. But you're going to get one shot at this, and everything you say is going to be recorded. So if you call back and change your story later, they're going to remember, and that's going to create more problems for you. So think about what you're going to say. Do not use terms like fictitious pickup, strategic theft, cluster theft, raid confirmation. Stick to simple law enforcement terms. It was theft by deception. It was theft by conversion. They came to the warehouse and stole my stuff. And a uniformed police officer who's going to take the report, remember, you're not making a police report with the detective. The detective is going to see your case 2 or 3 days later when it gets assigned. So you're going to have to talk in those kind of basic terms to the police officer who's used to handling hundreds of different types of 911 calls, from domestic violence to robbery to shoplifting to missing person to dog barking, loud music, etc. So you're going to have to get it really simple and get them on board, get them on your team to at least get that police report made, get that case number, and then move forward with that after you get that case number.
So, like you just mentioned, I know it takes a couple of days for something to get assigned to detectives. Most of the time, that freight's completely gone. Is it you normally just contacting CargoNet, and that kind of helps speed up the process as far as getting things recovered? Or chances of getting things recovered are so low, so it's discouraging even to make reports. I think that's why so many people don't make a report. But I guess I think there's ways to do it that you have greater success. What are some things that you're seeing as far as boots on the ground actually making real recoveries?
So that's a two-part answer. First off, it's important, it's critical. Even if you're making a report, even if you know your freight's gone, don't ever have that attitude of what good does it do to make the police report, because they're not going to find it anyway. What we've done is we've taken a dot, a pinpoint off the map. We've told that agency that supply chain theft is not important to the industry. Therefore, they do not need to have a reaction or response for it. It's
Mm,
like, if you don't make a police report, you're never going to get the attention of the command staff. But if we get, say you have pick an area of Atlanta that's bad. If you've got everybody calling every day, hey, where's my report? What's going on with my crime? Sooner or later, that's going to get the attention of the command staff, whether it's the county or the city or the state. The state now in Georgia has a small little group working task force under the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement. So, you're going to get the attention. And let's think of this, and you're going to have to remind me the second part of the question later. If there's a shopping center and we're talking about organized retail crime, and some companies have a policy, they don't report their shoplifting to local law enforcement. So if
mhm.
I'm looking at the crime stats for that particular area, I don't see any shoplifting. I don't see any crime. Therefore, I'm not going to assign 2 patrol cars to work that area. I may not even assign 1 because it's a crime-free area. I'm going to move my resources somewhere else.
Interesting. Yeah. Good point.
So we've got to make that police report. And I think the second part of your question was, the follow-up is that may be gone after a couple days. The product, I think that's what you were asking
Yeah.
me.
And
The
how was
product
with
may be gone. Well, that's where we come in, the industry partnership that we have with law enforcement, that we can circumvent that. I know when I was with the county here in Georgia, something was stolen. It has to go through a process through, it's called, and now it's called NIBRS, National Incident Based Reporting, where the report's got to be validated before it gets to the uniform sergeant to assign it to the detective. We used to call it the UCR code, but it's got to meet certain criteria before it goes through the chain to get to the sergeant or lieutenant who's going to assign that case to a detective. So one of the things we do is we circumvent that. We possibly are going to know someone with that agency where we can say, okay, hey, there's something headed your way. And they're saying, oh, that's great news because we're working a case on that individual right now. Or we just had an informant call us and told us about these goods. Informed police officers aren't going to have contact with informants and have sources of info. They should not. They really shouldn't. Some do, but they shouldn't have those type of sources of information, giving them those kind of things to actively pursue, a recovery and arrest and prosecution.
Yeah. What would you say is like the actual recovery rate? Do you guys have those? I'm sure you guys have those stats, but
We do not. And here's
okay.
why. A lot of times it's recovered and no one notifies us.
Gotcha.
A few other reasons. One, if we had those, it would be, if we tracked them, it would be so low. People would say, wow, there's very few recoveries. Well, there are, but we don't track them because no one tells us. If we
Right.
get a recovery, we all internally here at CargoNet, we might all, high five internally and say, I'll always call them and say, good job. Thanks for following up on that. But the recoveries, it's like organized retail crime. There's
Right.
no recoveries, right? You get goods back, but it doesn't go back in your inventory. It's sold through another market. The recoveries are far and few between. And a lot of times I'll say, whatever happened to that? I'll talk to one of my customers. Remember that big theft you had? Oh yeah, we got that back. Well, you didn't tell us. Yeah,
Right.
well, we just found out about it ourselves. Again, I don't think you have enough time to let me vent on that.
No, I hear you. Well, and just to kind of circle back with what you were saying about making the police reports, I think another big thing to keep in mind is sometimes whenever they make these big raids of warehouses or the buildings, like you said, second floor building of wherever, they find all this product and then they don't know where it goes, and not having a report, not having SKU numbers, that type of information is so crucial if you're wanting to have anything come back. And I think also another thing to think of is those bad guys, as soon as you get hit, I mean, you're on like a list. You're on like a target list of, hey, this broker is easy to get in, or this shipper is easy to steal from, or they don't do inventory for X amount of time and they don't notice for this long. I guess you guys are, I'm sure, seeing the same type of thing. And I know you guys talk on this.
Yeah, so a couple points there. One is a lot of times the victim, we've tracked it down. The victim doesn't even know it's stolen, and we'll call the
Hmm.
victim and we'll say, "Hey, are you missing this?" I say, "Yeah, we are. We're missing this," and we'll notify them that their product is in this particular warehouse. What was the second part of your question?
Basically, I was just kind of talking about whenever a recovery or whenever the like making a report and having the skews happen, and then
Oh, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, that was an important point because I'm glad you reminded me of that because they're hooked on the drugs now. So you mentioned that, yeah, they have a market for it. They're hooked on it. So we've set up
Hmm.
bad guy supply chains. We have not intentionally done it, but we've assisted by our business practices set up bad guy supply chains. So if you think about this, I've got a market for a certain type of electronics, obviously food and beverage is the number one item stolen. Certain people only monitor electronics, but we monitor everything. The number one item stolen is food and beverage. But let's say electronics. I'm stealing this particular type or brand of electronics, and I keep stealing them because it's so easy. Now I have a market set up somewhere to sell them.
Hmm.
I've set up my lifestyle around these stolen goods. I'm hooked on it. I have people working for me that are hooked on it because they like getting paid cash because nobody's writing a check and taking out taxes. So they're hooked on the goods, and we've set up a whole network of my family is dependent on these goods. I'm at the end of the line on the bad guy side. I don't know if they're stolen. I'm just helping sell them, and it's a good deal for me. And what happens if the stolen goods go away? Well, then I have to go steal something else or get a job, and I'm not going to let that happen. So I'm going to continue to be more creative. I'm going to continue to find better ways to circumvent the system. I had a customer call me, ask me for best practices. Do you post best practices? And we used to, and we don't anymore because if we posted best practices on how to avoid these things, all the bad
Yeah.
guy has to do is look at those, and they have a recipe now for how to steal to work around all these things. So we don't post them anymore. I don't even put them in my PowerPoint presentations anymore. I'll talk to people if they call me, but it's we're giving the bad guys, kind of the roadmap to success sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of times, especially on LinkedIn, you'll see people post like, "Oh, this is the new trend of this," and you're like, "Oh my gosh, stop!" I mean, I think it's important for like as far as like CargoNet vetting services, all those guys to kind of know and build things within platforms to throw up red flags. But I'm a huge believer on tech's not going to save the world, and you need to have tech and human intervention kind of with it. Like I think nothing's stronger than somebody on the phone talking to a carrier and getting those spidey senses and stuff like that. So processes obviously are great and there's a lot of steps you can do and tech's definitely there to help you and speed things up. But I think there's a lot of things on a person to person basis that because we book a lot of loads via email, we have lost that and that's why it's shot through the roof. That's my theory anyways.
Well, I agree with you 100%. If you think about, from my law enforcement background, I was around before the emergence of all this technology. Now we have all the technology, but it takes a combination of good old fashioned police work
Uh-huh.
and the technology to solve a crime now. As we see what's going on with the sad situation in Arizona, there's good old fashioned police work, boots on the ground doing, out searching, right? But with the use of technology, it works hand in hand. So you make a very good point about that phone, that one-on-one. I know we can never go back to that every load you're talking to someone, but there's got to be some type of random process to where we're going to talk to 3 out of every 10 loads we move. And I tell people all the time, especially in my world, I talk to young police officers all the time that are in trouble or did something. And I'll say, look, always remember you're being watched all the time. You're being recorded all the time. People pick up on what you're doing. And that's what the
Mhm.
bad guys are doing with us. They've figured out, they kind of figured out the recipe, the secret sauce, if you will, to the way we do business. And they've just used that against us.
Well, I think it's interesting too because sometimes you'll see. I had one the other day where the carrier honestly looks squeaky clean, and there's something like now FMCSA changes happened right after all the thefts happen. Of course, that happens in a matter of 2 days. Then FMCSA contact changes that finally go through, or whatever the case is. But it's crazy because there's no leg in history. Because a lot of times we say like, well, they buy an MC and they sit on it. they're even getting clever with that because we've been talking about that, and so they always change their ways, so it's harder and harder to catch these guys. I think by of course talking about it, but it's hard because you need to educate on it. That's why I have this show is that, like, people do need to know things, but obviously secret sauce is like a one-on-one conversation.
So
Yeah.
think about the, and I don't want to mention any of the marketplace again. We don't want to give any secrets out here, but if you think about all the marketplaces where you can buy a carrier or an MC number. So if I'm a bad guy, I'm going to find a legacy carrier that's getting ready to get out. I
Mhm.
go to that legacy carrier that's got a good book of business. And if they're set up with this company and they're set up with that company, that determines the price. So if they're set up with some folks, or they've been approved by some folks that haul high value goods, I'm going to pay them a little more money. And I'm buying everything lock, stock, and barrel. I
Yeah.
know it's a requirement. You have to notify, FMCSA, but a requirement is not a law.
Yeah.
So a requirement is just a suggestion.
Well,
So
even if it was a law, these guys aren't afraid to break a law,
no,
you know?
well, we don't even know who they are. We don't know who they are. So they buy the legacy carrier, they hang on to that for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden on Felony Friday, they hit, a group of shippers that they're set up with, and they get 10, 20 loads across, the enterprise of high value goods. And they may even try to use it again the following week because nobody realized that they were a victim yet, or they're playing the game, the trucks broke down, or uh,
Mhm.
whatever. And they may use it again, get 20, 30 loads picked up in the same area, all with the same driver. And
Yeah.
that's it. They're on the hunt now for another carrier to buy, another legacy carrier to buy. And they don't change anything. They're not going to use the carrier much longer. They're just going to change it, book some loads, and then let the company just dissolve.
One last thing I wanted to ask you, just kind of on a consumer basis, is you meant like a lot of those things are on like Facebook Marketplace or whatever, stolen goods. I don't know if it's always on there or where it gets sold at, but whenever kind of like it's too good to be true, even as a consumer purchasing. I think those who are in logistics, it's like, hey, if you don't be buying the cheapest Nike that you see on Facebook, that type of thing. Excuse me. Do you have any suggestions for that?
You know, we search those sites. We have a web crawler that goes out and search those sites for stolen goods. And there's so many goods that are similar to those stolen goods that are being sold on those e-tailers that it's hard to pinpoint something that's stolen unless the bad guy lists the serial number of the stolen item on the marketplace, whatever they're using. Because if I'm selling, apparel, and I'm selling a high-end apparel that's not even been released yet, that's an easy one. But
Yeah.
the bad guys are smart. They don't put those on the marketplaces. They sell them in other markets, or they hold them until the full release and then they release them. So
Yep.
it's hard to define what's stolen and what's legitimate. And some of the best fencing operations that I served search warrants on and recovered stolen goods, the bad guys were very good at commingling stolen goods in the same area with legitimate goods. So if I'm looking for stolen cereal, for example, and I'm looking for 18 pallets, and I find 18 pallets, well, there's a pretty good chance that that may be my stolen stuff,
Right.
especially if the guy running the warehouse doesn't have a receipt for it, or he says, well, I bought it from a guy, I don't know, and I paid him cash, right? So there
Mhm.
you go with the newer should have known. But if those 18 pallets are commingled with another 20 or 25 pallets, how do I determine those are the 18 pallets that are stolen? And remember what I said when we first started, the three things are what I think, what I know, and what I can prove. And I
Yeah.
can't put somebody in jail with what I think or what I know. I have to put them in jail with what I can prove, and I can't seize those items unless I can prove they're stolen.
Yeah, good point. Well, I know we're wrapping up on time here. So, real quick, kind of plug in how people can reach you, CargoNet. How can they be involved with helping in the community or things like that? And I definitely, everybody out there needs to go to your guys' summit. That was the most educational summit I've ever been to, for sure.
Yeah. The best way to report a theft to us, and we'll take in a theft from anyone, you can report your theft to us, cargo theft at cargonet.com. And my email address is klewis@verisk.com.
Love it. Thanks so much for your time. I really, really, really appreciate it. Like I said, I've been wanting you on here for a long time. One of my favorite guys out there in the industry for cargo theft. So, thanks so much and have a good day.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Bye, guys.